Welcome to the Author Your Life podcast, where you can write a new script for your life and become the hero of your story. I'm your host, David McRae. You are the author of your life. Let's get started.
All you have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to you.
In my experience, there's no such thing as luck.
It is not our abilities that show what we truly are. It is our choices.
Hello, my friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Author Your Life podcast. On this episode, we have something slightly different for you. Normally on the podcast, we have either an interview with an inspiring person or a short piece of training or instruction by myself. In today's episode, we have a long piece of training or instruction by myself. For a couple of episodes this month, I'm going to share with you some recent live trainings that I did. At the end of August, I ran a 7-day online festival, the Author Your Life Festival. And on each of these days, we had a daily show covering topics, concepts, part of your journey to rewriting your narrative and becoming the hero of your story. And here on the podcast, for those of you who weren't aware of the festival, or you missed the festival, or you even just want a refresher on the things that you did engage with during the festival, I've included some of the most popular episodes here on the podcast. So today, we're going to be looking at the Mozart Mind. And this is a recording from the training that I did all about how our brain has this phenomenal ability to grow and adapt and change, and how you tap into this ability to make your own personal changes that you're looking for in life. So I'll leave you to enjoy this live show that I did on the Mozart Mind. All right, guys, we are live. Welcome to the Author Your Life Festival. Through the entirety of this week, we're going to have a live show for you each day, every day, at this moment in time, 5 p.m. And what the Author Your Life Festival is all about is bringing people like you together who want to make a change in their lives. Specifically, those of you who've looked at the current story of your life, the current narrative, and you're saying to yourself, is this really me? Is this really what I want from my life? Am I being the person who I want to be? Am I doing the things that I want to do? Am I impacting others in the way that I really want to make an impact? This is what we're going to be covering here in the festival. And what we're going to develop for you is the ability to change this narrative. Because all of you are coming here into the festival with an existing story. A story that's already been partially written. The ink is already dry on the pages. We can go back into the past, we can look at that story and we can examine it, we can learn from it, we can reflect upon it. Ultimately, there's nothing that we can do to edit or erase that story. But right here, in the present, you have a choice. You have a decision that you can make. That decision, that choice, is going to impact the story from this moment on. Because ahead of all of us in our futures are blank pages. And you can write whatever you want on those pages. If you're not being the person who you want to be, if you're not doing the things you want to do, if you're not impacting other people the way that you want to, you, my friends, can change that. And that is what this festival is going to show you. We're going to walk you through the process of how you make this happen. We're going to be examining the 3 key components of any story, and in particular, your story. These 3 components are the hero, the quest, and the characters. And we're going to be starting off here today with the Mozart Mind. We're going to be examining you, the hero. How would you develop yourself as the protagonist of your story? How would you become the main character and the main influencer in your particular story. Today and tomorrow, we're going to be covering how you make this possible. We're going to be diving into your mind and showing you the possibilities. I see we have a couple of people who are starting to come on live. Welcome to day one of the Author Your Life Festival. We've got a lot lined up for you this week, and I don't want to preamble too much. I want to really launch straight into this stuff, showing you the possibilities, showing you how you make a change in your life. Who's that coming on? We've got Lydia coming on. Nice to meet you, Lydia. Looking forward to seeing everyone else who comes on today. And as a little explanation before we launch into things, I'm going to be covering quite a lot of things. I'm going to get into teaching mode, I'm going to get into speaking mode, I'm going to have energy and passion coming off me. If at any time I'm getting lost in my energy and passion and something isn't clear, or you'd like further clarification on something, then please let me know in the comments. Just let me know, David, didn't quite get that, can you run through it one more time? Or, David, that's really interesting. What about this? Does that explain this? As you start to have questions and queries coming up, please let me know in the comments below. And I may not answer them as we're going through mid-flow. There are a couple times where there'll be a break in the session when we're moving from one topic to the other. I can catch up with any questions then. Alternatively, at the very end, I'll have a Q&A segment where all of the questions that have accumulated and I haven't yet answered, that's the time that I'll do it for you guys. And for anyone who's watching the rerun, when you're watching this in the future, when the live video has already gone, if you're watching the replay version of this, then also leave your comments and questions below, because I can also come back and answer them retrospectively. I can come back and give you a written answer in the comments. So please let me know all of your questions. This is what it's all about. It's all about your story. It's how we change your story. And whatever you need, whatever you require to make that happen, then that's what we're going to focus on. That's what we're going to walk towards. So without further ado, we've got a couple people jumping on live already. This is excellent. Good to see you guys. Thank you for joining us. We're going to explain what the Mozart Mind is. The Mozart Mind. Well, let's focus on the inspiration for this particular phrase. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, considered one of the greatest musicians and composers of all time. Mozart has written a number of famous symphonies. He was an inspiration for many musicians who came after him. One particular aspect of Mozart's story that often fascinates a lot of people is that Mozart started his music career at a very young age. Mozart was able to play full piano pieces from the age of 3. And when we hear a story like this about Mozart, we think, wow, isn't that amazing? He was able to play the piano at 3 years old. What a gifted youngster. What a talented individual. What a genius. What I want to show you today is that Mozart was not gifted. He was not talented. He was not a genius. The reason for this is because there is nothing about Mozart that made him different from you. There's nothing about the way that Mozart's brain was shaped and constructed that is any different from the way that your brain is shaped and constructed. What Mozart did do, and what did make him a genius, was the way that he developed his mind. And he did so using very specific mechanisms of the brain. Now, Mozart wouldn't have been aware of this back in the 1700s when he was alive. We didn't have the psychology and neuroscience telling us what's going on in the brain. But Mozart was able to find this by himself, to utilize it and maximize it. And now today, with modern science, modern understanding of the way that our minds work, you too can understand this process. You too can develop the Mozart mind. So how is it done? What did Mozart do to become the musician that he was? Because Mozart was not born a genius, and I might have sounded a little harsh earlier when I said he wasn't a genius. What I meant was that Mozart wasn't born with the ability to play the piano. It's something he learned and developed. Because all of us as humans start off as a blank slate in life. If you want proof of this, go find a newborn baby, someone in your family or a friend who's had a baby recently, and look at what that baby is capable of doing. Very little is the answer. For those of you who've seen a baby recently, think about it. They can't walk, they can't talk, they can't understand things. A baby can't do the housework, a baby can't draw the designs for a building, a baby can't kick a ball, a baby can't play the piano. No baby is born a genius. No baby is born as a great architect, a great athlete, a great politician even. We are all born with the same blank slate. And the amazing ability that the human mind has is not what we're born with, it's what we can develop. And this leads me to this odd diagram here, and I'll explain why in all God's earth I've got a pair of googly eyes and a very suspect drawing of an ear. That is meant to be an ear, by the way. I tried to not make it look like a weird question mark, but I guess that's kind of how it came out. I am not a genius at art, not even close. We'll come back to that in a moment. What I was saying was that we are born with this blank slate. This blank slate is what neuroscientists call brain plasticity. What does brain plasticity mean? It's time for me to introduce our first prop of today's show. So here I have a piece of plasticine, and this plasticine represents the way that our brain is. Because I can do lots of things with this blob of plasticine. I can roll it up into something long and thin. I can turn it into two separate things. I can turn it into two balls. I can put it together, and I can make all sorts of weird and wonderful shapes at this. For some of my seminars, when I've got a bit of a smaller group, what I'll do is I'll hand round a piece of plasticine to everyone, and I'll say, use your imagination and make something out of this. And some people just kind of roll it up and they make a little ball. Some people I've seen, they make stick men. I had a cat one time, which was really good. Somebody made a cat out of that. And this is very similar to the way that our brain is when we first come into the world. Just like that piece of Play-Doh. Did I say plasticine earlier? I meant to say Play-Doh. Just like that piece of Play-Doh, we can mold and shape it into lots of different shapes. The way that our brain is at the beginning of life, it has a big capacity to grow and develop new neural connections. There's lots of different ways that we can shape and develop our brain as we go forward into life. Some people might choose to develop it through sports. They might develop good hand-eye coordination, the ability to use their feet. Some people might develop it in the realm of art. They can see a big picture and they can take a picture that they see in real life and put it down onto paper. They develop great dexterity in the way that they can use their hands. And some learn the piano. And this is what Mozart did. You see, Mozart didn't play the piano at 3 years old because he was born a genius. Mozart became a genius because he played the piano at 3 years old. At the age of 3, Mozart's mind was highly plastic. It had a great capacity to develop new neural connections. And this is why he was able to develop such musical proficiency. Because what he was doing from an early age was shaping the way that his brain was structured. And his brain started to cut off bits and certain neural connections that Mozart wasn't using. Mozart wasn't using his sporting ability, he wasn't going around kicking footballs, he wasn't using his artistic ability, capturing big pictures and putting them onto paper. So the brain started to cut off neural connections related to those activities and started to develop neural connections based on what he was doing all the time, playing the piano. And there's some really interesting studies that show just how far our brain grows and adapts. This wonderful ability to change and adapt according to the way that our life pans out. And this is why I've drawn the eyes and the ears. See, what you'll find in people who have been born blind from birth is that we have a visual cortex in our brain. We have a part of our brain that processes visual stimuli that comes into the eyes. But of course, in blind people, they don't have any visual stimulation coming in. That part of their brain isn't processing visual stimulus. It isn't processing the things that they see. So does that piece of brain just sit there, useless and dormant in their head? No. It evolves. It adapts. And what you'll find in people who've been blind from birth is that their visual cortex starts processing tactile sensations, the sense of touch. So what you actually find in individuals who are blind is that they have greater tactile sensitivity in their fingers. They can feel more of their fingers, and actually this makes blind people a better reader of Braille than someone who isn't blind. So you can actually train someone who's not blind to read Braille, but actually the blind person will always be able to read it faster because they have that extra sensitivity, because their visual cortex has started to take over a new role. It's changed and adapt into being able to process what's going on tactily. You can also observe this in another type of individual, in individuals who have been deaf from birth. Because just like we have a visual cortex in our brain that processes the sights and visual stimuli coming in, so too we have an auditory cortex. An auditory cortex that processes the sounds that are coming in. Now, of course, for those people who have been deaf from birth, their auditory cortex isn't getting any stimulus. There's no sounds coming in. So again, does that part of the brain sit dormant in the head? No. Again, it changes and adapts. And actually, what you'll find is that in people who've been born deaf, their auditory cortex starts to actually take over some of the extra visual stimulus. And what you'll find in particular is that deaf people have a greater peripheral vision than people who aren't deaf. They can see more out of the corner of their eyes. That's because they have extra processing power that's taking over some of the visual stimulus that's coming in. So this demonstrates the phenomenal ability that our brain has to grow and adapt, and not just to grow new neural pathways, but actually to have whole parts of the brain shifting task, shifting function according to that individual's preferences and needs in life. It really is an astonishing instrument. I see we've got a couple more people who've been flashing by as I was explaining brain plasticity. We've got Lydia again, we've got Marion. Sometimes the people who are watching don't always show up. Sometimes you need to do a little bit of a swipe. You never know who exactly is on, but thank you all for joining today. I hope you've been enjoying what we've been talking about so far. We're talking about the Mozart Mind. We're talking about the way that our brain can grow and develop, the way that all our brains can grow and develop. And that's really key. So that's brain plasticity. It's the idea that our brain really is like this blank piece of Play-Doh. We can mold it and change it into anything that we want. And there's a second process that I'd like to share with you, which is really key to understanding how Mozart developed his genius. Not born a genius. He didn't have it all from birth, but he did certainly develop it. And he did it through utilizing brain plasticity, the ability of the brain to grow and mold into certain tasks and certain abilities. The second function that Mozart didn't knowingly use, but certainly utilized, was this process. So what are these weird cylinders that I've drawn here? These weird cylinders, we've got a couple more people popping in live. Good to see you guys. Thank you for joining. If at any time you have any questions about what I'm talking about, pop them in the comments below and I'll answer them when we have a break in the conversation. We've got here nerves. Not I'm getting on your nerves. I'm talking about the nerves that we have all over our body, and in particular in our brains. These are neuroconnections. So what you'll have with a nerve, now I'm aware that the camera is cutting off the whiteboard at a certain point, so I think I can just fit in a little description here. So let's say we've got cell A. This is cell A. And they want to speak to cell B. They want to send them a message. The cell B, from one part of the brain, shout out, "Oi! Barry! Can you tell Mr. Human to move his right finger to point at the camera?" You get that, Barry? What? That's not how a brain communicates. They're not shouting at each other across large distances. There is a connection between the two. A neuroconnection, you can think of this like a telephone wire or even an internet wire. I like the internet analogy and I'll explain why in just a moment. So you've got this internet wire where cell A in one particular part of the brain has a direct connection to cell B in another part of the brain, and they can send a signal between each other to communicate. This is how all of our processes in life work. All of our behaviors, all of our thoughts, all of our emotions come from these type of communications, these type of signals. And what you have on this nerve is you have this substance that wraps around it. And what that substance does is it helps to conduct the signal. This substance is called myelin. I'll write that down for you, myelin. Myelin. So myelin is this fatty sheath that wraps around the nerve that goes between two cells, and that helps to conduct the electrical signal. Now what you'll notice is that the more times that connection is activated, the more times a signal is sent, that myelin sheath starts to get thicker and thicker. And when you have a thicker myelin sheath, that allows the message to transmit stronger and faster. So whether that be the ability to move your hand, whether that be the ability to think up new ideas, whether that be the ability to feel compassion for someone, all of those signals get strengthened the more that we use them. So if you imagine this, I used the analogy of the internet a moment ago because I think this is a really good analogy to explain this. So for those of you who are slightly older, a little bit slightly older than me actually, you'll remember that when the internet first came around, there was dial-up. Do you remember dial-up internet? Let me know in the comments below if you remember dial-up internet. Seems like so long ago. That was actually my first introduction to the internet. I remember when I was a child that when an adult was going on the computer, whether it was my mom or even like a teacher at school, they were using dial-up to get online. And dial-up was literally phoning the internet asking if you could get on. And for those of you who remember, you lived in a house where either you were a kid living with your siblings and your parents, or you were a parent and you had the kids in the house, you had to tell people, don't go on the phone! I'm trying to go on the internet. You couldn't use your phone and the internet at the same time because the internet was using your phone line to phone up and ask to get online. And I'm sure for those of you who had that experience, you'll remember that horrible noise that AOL dial-up made, that as it was trying to get online. If you remember how the internet used to be in the period of dial-up, that is kind of like your neural connections when they haven't been used very often. So last summer, whilst I was on holiday, I was getting some tennis lessons. Now, tennis is one of the few sports that I've never really been able to get into that much. I've never been able to get any kind of sort of natural proficiency at it. I've got a reasonably good hand-eye coordination and I'm reasonably fit, so I can generally get into a lot of sports quickly, but tennis is just something that I've really struggled with for as long as I've ever tried to engage with it. What I find is that in tennis, when I'm hitting the ball, I really struggle to hit the ball anywhere that isn't bang straight into the net or hitting it so it goes way over the fence out the court. I've really struggled to just get the ball back on the court where it's supposed to go. So my neural connections related to the way that I need to use my body when I'm hitting a tennis ball is in dial-up mode. The signal between A and B is weak and slow. So when I'm getting in position to hit a tennis ball, I'm not getting into the right position, I'm not looking at the ball the way I should, I'm not coordinating all the different parts of my body as well as a professional tennis player or even a reasonably good amateur to hit that ball. So when I was first starting to get these classes, my myelin was in dial-up mode. It was slow, it was clunky, as I was hitting that ball. But what happens as I started to go to these classes was that I was beginning to actually get the ball back over the net. I was learning that some of the technique that you need to be able to hit the tennis ball well. I was learning what I'd been doing wrong previously up until then, and I learned a better technique to do it, and I was starting to work on that technique. We had an entire class that was just about hitting your forehand again and again and again. Entire class that was just about your backhand hitting again and again and again. So what was happening as I kept on using these connections, as A kept on speaking to B, that myelin sheath was growing thicker and thicker, and I was starting to move out of dial-up mode and into broadband. So for those of you who don't remember dial-up, it's probably because you came into the internet era when we had broadband. Now broadband was great. It really started to open up the internet to the masses. Broadband meant that we didn't have to call up the internet to get on. We could get on through different methods. It was faster, it was more convenient, it was easier to use, it was a lot more comfortable to use. Broadband was great. Certainly when I first started getting into using the internet, this is what I came into. I came into the broadband era of internet. I wasn't using the internet back in dial-up phase. That was several years before my time. So broadband, the internet is faster, it's quicker, it's better. And that was just like the way that my tennis skills were developing. As I kept on hitting these forehands and hitting these backhands, I was starting to develop my neural connections related to the activity of playing tennis. I was entering broadband. So there'll be some of you watching this who you've got something that you want to start, there's something new that you're trying, and right now you're feeling like you're in dial-up mode. You're saying, oh, I'm slow, I'm clunky, this is uncomfortable for me. But here's the thing. Don't quit just because you're in dial-up mode. If we had quit the internet when it was in the dial-up period, Imagine how the world would be different now if we hadn't persevered through that difficult, awkward, clunky phase and moved into something greater. Allow yourself to go through that awkward process and evolution, and as you start to use these neural connections more consistently, you'll start to develop this myelin in a process that we call myelination. Myelination describes the process of this myelin sheath getting thicker and thicker. And you'll move into broadband. Now, for those of you who are looking to make really big changes in your life and you're looking to develop a high level of skill and expertise in an area, then you can move over here. Because we had broadband for a long time. Broadband was good, it allowed us to do things comfortably and with relative ease, but the internet has continued evolving and developing, and it still will continue to evolve and develop. And eventually, as you too are honing your skills and abilities, you can move from broadband into fiber optic. Fiber optic, super fast. See, the problem with broadband was good and allowed us to browse with relative ease, but man, downloads and uploads were slow. You had to wait for a long time to get anything off the internet and wait for a long time to get anything onto the internet. Fine once things were up there already, fine when you had things on your computer already, but trying to make the transition between the two, man, that needed a lot of power and energy and a lot of time. Then along came fiber optic. Now you can get an hour-long video like that. Now you can put up an hour-long video like that. I would not be able to do this live stream that I'm doing with you right now if fiber optic hadn't come in. We just wouldn't have had the capacity to do this. I'm doing this right now on my phone. What phones were able to do in the era of dial-up is just completely uncomparable. And this is the process that you will go through too. As you continue to use a neural connection and a neural circuit, you can move from dial-up into broadband, and eventually you can get to fiber optic where things are fast, efficient, slick. And who knows what comes next after fiber optic? Who knows what comes next for you after fiber optic? And this is what happened with Mozart. Believe it or not, Mozart had a time when he was in dial-up. Yes, it was at a much younger age than most of us when we start playing the piano. And yes, it wouldn't have lasted so long as it does for some of us, because his brain was hugely receptive to learning and building new connections. But there was a time when Mozart only had a dial-up piano brain. There was a time when Mozart only had a broadband piano playing. And eventually, he was able to develop, and I'd say Mozart probably went past fiber optic into whatever there is next. But there was a process that he used. And what I want to demonstrate from what we've talked about so far and what you've been watching so far is that you can do the same. You have the exact same brain processes that Mozart did. There is no reason why you can't develop and grow whatever skills and abilities you're looking to grow right now in your life in the same manner that Mozart did. Geniuses are not born, they're made. And that is the key message that I want to get to you in today's show. Geniuses are not born, they're made. You are not born with a particular story. You are not born to live out a particular script. You can choose what story you want in life. You can choose what script you want to live to. For any time you don't like what's going on, you don't like the person you're being, you don't like the things that you're doing, you can change what's going on. You can literally change your qualities, change your abilities. You can become the person who you want to be. You can do the things that you want to do in life. Is it going to take time? Absolutely. Is it going to take hard work? Absolutely. Is it going to be a challenge and a struggle at times? Absolutely. But what I want you to know is it's possible. And what I'd like to do now is to show you and break down some of the habits that you can develop, some of the practices and strategies to how you make this happen. How you start to actively rewire and reprogram your brain in the direction that you want it to go. So I think this is us roughly about halfway. So I'm going to prepare the next little half of today's show. So for those of you who've been watching, if you've got any questions about what we just covered in that first half, or indeed just any questions generally, any thoughts that you've had as we've looked at this, then please do let me know in the comments below. I've had a couple of you guys giving comments as we've been going through. You never quite see all the things that are coming up on live for some reason. Goodness me. This pen is really smudgy. Talk amongst yourselves as the teacher's putting this up on the board. Man, I'm going to have to give this a clean after we finish this live. What is going on here? Am I using a different pen to normal? No? Very odd. I'm sure you can't see the smudges on the screen, but I can see this very clearly as I'm doing this. We'll have to clean that for tomorrow's show. So let's look at how we start to put some of these principles into action. And the title we're going to start off with is So for those of you who are familiar with personal development, self-help, you may have heard about having a growth mindset. Even for those of you who aren't especially familiar, but you work in education or you work in corporate or just generally working anywhere actually, a lot of this growth mindset stuff is really starting to permeate into organizational and company culture of this is the ideal to have, this is something that you should be developing in the individual workers, this is something you should be developing in teams, this is something you should be developing in the company or organization culture. So it's likely that you've heard a little or a lot about this already. Maybe you've been on whole training days where you've got to learn about this. And I think this is good. This is really important science-backed evidence, science-backed research into the way that we should be thinking, the way that we should be approaching things in life. But I think sometimes we are getting caught up in the hype and the concepts. And actually people are saying, right, okay, I want you in this team, I want you to be growth-minded and I want a company to have a growth mindset. But what are they doing about it? Okay, you want the members of your team to have a growth mindset. What are you doing day to day to develop a growth mindset? And I think most companies, most organizations couldn't answer that. Or they'd give a very flimsy answer. They would talk about some of the things they've heard on a training day that they should be doing, but they're not actually doing. So how do we take theory into practice? How do we take concept into reality? How do we start to develop this growth mindset? Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with growth mindset and you don't know what growth mindset is, don't worry. We're going to outline it here, and I'm going to outline it in possibly a slightly different way to what you've heard it already. Because I think when we're looking at fixed versus growth mindset, there are 3 parameters that we can really focus on and actively engage in, actively change in our lives, actively create and manifest in order to develop this growth mindset. So these 3 things are challenge, effort. Do I have enough room for number 3? Yes, I do. Awesome. And failure. On these 3 parameters, you can see the difference between someone who has a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And if you want to develop more of a growth mindset, you can do so based upon looking at these 3 parameters. So let's cover the difference. First of all, let's actually explain what these 2 mindsets are. So if you've got someone who has a fixed mindset, essentially someone with a fixed mindset doesn't believe any of the stuff that I've just talked about here today on this live video. Someone with a fixed mindset doesn't believe that their brain has the ability to change and evolve. They don't believe that they can get any better at things. They believe that geniuses are not made, that geniuses are actually born. People with a fixed mindset don't believe that your brain is this piece of Play-Doh that you can mold and shape into whatever you want. They believe that the brain is more like this cup that we've got here. It's fixed. I can't turn this cup into anything different really without just breaking it into pieces and starting all over again. This Play-Doh, however, I can do lots of different things to that in its current state. There are lots of different options for me with that piece of Play-Doh. There's not really any options for me with that cup that I just showed you. People with a fixed mindset believe that their mind is like that cup. What they're born with, they're stuck with. And this simple belief starts to manifest itself in lots of different ways in their life. The first thing you'll see is that people with the fixed mindset don't like challenge. They don't like being pushed. Because when you have a fixed mindset, you believe that you have a certain level of talent that you're born with. So let's take playing the piano for an example, since we're talking about Mozart. Someone with a fixed mindset believes that their ability to play the piano has been gifted to them from birth. And that ability is all that they'll ever have. They'll never get any better at it. So let's say that they're playing the piano and they start playing the piano at a young age at school and they find that actually they're a bit better at playing the piano than the rest of their peers. So they like this. They find the piano easy. So they keep on playing the piano because they're finding it easy. Easy means good. Easy shows that they're talented, that they have a high level of innate skill in whatever that activity is. But as they start getting older and they start going up through the school, suddenly they're not finding it so easy. The pieces that they're having to play are getting more difficult. They're not so far ahead of their peers. In fact, their peers are catching up with them. They're much more on a par. As they keep on developing and playing harder pieces, they're starting to find the music challenging. They used to find it easy to do a simple 3-finger piece, but suddenly, when 2 hands are starting to come into play, they're finding it difficult. They're finding it challenging. And this is what people with a fixed mindset don't like. Because whenever they're faced with a challenge, they feel that it's exposing that they're not good enough. This is rife in our society. People who are scared of challenge. As soon as things get tough, as soon as things get difficult, they give up. You see it all the time, every single year in January. On the 1st of January, people have all these goals and targets for what they want to do. They want to lose weight, they want to earn more money, they want to have a new relationship. And as soon as things get tough, they stop. They go into the gym, they start running, and they think, oh God, actually, this isn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. Or actually, you know what, I really want to get into that top tier managerial position, but actually, maybe middle management is all I'll ever amount to. People with a fixed mindset are scared of challenge. And because they're scared of challenge, they never properly engage in it. And if you never properly engage in challenge, you never really grow and you never really find fulfillment in life. If I was to ask each of you watching right now, what are your 5 proudest achievements? As you think through those 5 achievements that made you most proud, I bet that every single one of them involved overcoming a challenge. You ran a marathon, you got a qualification, a degree, you climbed a mountain, you beat cancer. Whatever it is, whatever that thing that makes you most proud, I bet all of those 5 involved overcoming a challenge. Challenge is such a key and important part of living a fulfilled life. But for those with a fixed mindset, they don't like it, they avoid it, and so they miss out on so much of that growth and fulfillment. What you find is that people with a fixed mindset also don't like effort. And it kind of links into what we've been talking about with a challenge there. They feel that everything in life should come easily. If you're born with the ability to do something, then you should be able to move through it effortlessly. You shouldn't find difficulties. You shouldn't find obstacles. You shouldn't find roadblocks. So if we think back to all those people who are going into the gym in January and they're gone by February. Why? Because they got on that treadmill and after 10 minutes they were thinking, oh my God, I'm out of breath, I'm sweaty, I'm disgusting. This is too hard. And this is a problem that we have in our society nowadays. So many things have been made easy for us. And this ease and convenience is great. Look at what I'm doing right now. Through the virtue of technology, I'm able to talk to you in your homes. I'm able to talk to you in different cities, in different countries. There is no effort required now in me being able to speak to you. I don't have to travel to your city. I don't have to travel to your country in order to be able to talk to you. We can buy things with a click of a mouse. We can order things straight to our door. Even our groceries, our food. We don't have to go out and hunt and kill animals. We don't have to gather and pick plants to eat. Our food is taken to our door nowadays. There's no effort involved. And the problem is, when so many of these things are effortless, we believe that everything in life should be effortless. We don't see the difference between having someone deliver our groceries to the door and running on a treadmill for 25 minutes. We don't see the difference between being able to buy a book on Amazon with one click of the mouse and being able to write a book. I think in life and the way that our society and technology is advancing nowadays, I think it's going to become easier and easier to acquire things. We're going to be able to get things faster than ever, easier than ever. And by the way, I think this is a good thing. I think it's taking so much energy away from lower cognitive tasks. If you think back to our ancestral days as hunter-gatherers, how much time was spent having to hunt, having to make shelter, having to make clothes. We spent a lot of time on basic survival stuff. But nowadays, because we're able to solve so many of these survival problems very easily and very simply, that is opening up energy and cognitive capacity for higher goals, for impact, for meaning, for contribution. I think it's great that these things are being made easy and convenient, but we've got to be careful. Items, I think, are going to become easier and more convenient than ever. But results are going to be just as hard as they've always been, and possibly even a little bit harder, because of the contrast between how easy some other things in life are. So I think it'll be easier than ever to get your nice pair of Nike trainers, but you need to work just as hard to get fit in those Nike trainers. So that's a key distinction. And it's a distinction that people with a fixed mindset don't understand. They think if at any time they're putting effort in, they're not doing it right, or they shouldn't be doing it. No, effort shows that you're working towards a result. And leading on from this, people with a fixed mindset do not like failure. Failure is a big no-no for them. Because what failure ultimately exposes is they're not good enough. They weren't born with the skills. They weren't born with the talent. They weren't born with the ability. And because of how they think, they will never have those skills. They will never have those abilities. And all that failure does is point it out to them. All that failure does is get your head and really dig it into the ground. You're not good enough and you never will be. That is the way that the fixed mindset individual looks at failure. They see failure as a reflection on them. They see I have failed as being I am a failure. So the fixed mindset is not what we want. What we want for you is to develop this growth mindset that everyone is talking about. Because people with a growth mindset, they believe all that stuff that I was telling you at the start of the video. They believe that they have the ability to grow and improve. They believe that they have the ability to learn and develop new skills. And that's why I've shown you today that this isn't just a belief. This is science. This is fact. You can learn. You can develop new skills. And because of this, people with a growth mindset love a challenge. Because a challenge is how you learn. If you just keep on doing things that you find easy all the time, you're only going to stay at that skill level. When you challenge yourself, when things suddenly become more difficult, then you know you're learning. You know that you're growing. Growth mindset, love a challenge. Challenge means growth. For those of you who are thinking of those 5 achievements you're proud of, why did you do them in the first place? Why did you run that marathon? Why did you do that degree? Why did you climb that mountain? You didn't have to, but you did. And this is because actually, we as humans have this hardwired drive for challenge. Sometimes we like the thought of being able to lie on a beach in the sun or sit in bed watching Netflix all day. But actually, if we did that all the time, we'd get depressed. We'd get bored. We'd get lethargic. Actually, as humans, we have this innate drive to overcome challenge. We look at the moon and say, I want to step on there one day. We look at this thing in our pocket and say, I think we can do more with this. We look at the way that we're using energy in the world and we say, no, I don't think this is right. I think we can do better. As humans, we're constantly looking for these challenges. We love attempting a challenge because we love mastering a challenge. So people with a growth mindset, they love challenge because they love mastering them. And they also understand that you need effort to do this. People with a growth mindset recognize the relationship between challenge and effort. If you're going to challenge yourself, if you're going to push yourself to grow, it's going to take some hard work. They recognize that things are going to be tough. You're going to be pushed out your comfort zone. But actually, if we think back to that exercise analogy earlier, and I was talking about running on the treadmill. When you first get on the treadmill after you haven't been doing exercise for a while, man, it feels rough. It's tough. It's not nice. It's something you have to force yourself through. But actually, maybe on that run, or the next run, or the next couple runs after that, you start to get to a point where you enjoy the process. You're running along, you're like, whew, I'm out of breath, I'm hot and sweaty, but man, do I feel like I'm getting somewhere with this. Man, do I feel like I'm channeling this effort and it's going somewhere. People with growth mindset, they like effort because they understand the relationship that effort has to challenge. And most key, people with growth mindset like failure because they understand that in life, we either win or we learn. It's not a win-lose game. You either do something right, and that helps you to do it right in the future, or you do something wrong, and you recognize the way not to do it, and you learn from that. You adapt, you grow. People with a growth mindset understand that failure is not the opposite of success. It is the key to success. If you look at any successful person in any field or pursuit, you will see a long line of failures. Those failures have allowed them to get to where they are now, allow them to achieve that success that we see now. And often we only see the snapshot in life. We see the end result of success, and we don't see all of the failures along their journey that allow them to get to that point. So this is what people with a growth mindset understand, is they embrace failure. They accept it. They understand how important it is to the process. So what we want to do in terms of thinking about the Mozart mind, how you develop your genius, is how we can tap into each of these parameters. How we move from the fixed into the growth. How we move from not liking challenge to embracing challenge. How we move from putting in little effort to putting in a lot of effort. How we move from avoiding failure into accepting failure. So I've got a couple of things to share with you. First of all, for challenge, something that I recommend, and one of my favourite ways to tap into challenge, is the 30-day challenge. So the 30-day challenge, as the name implies, is setting yourself something that you want to accomplish or achieve in the next 30 days. So this might be improving your running time, this might be getting a certain amount of growth in your business, this might even be improving your relationships, it might be to make more friends or to network with more people. Whatever it is, you set a challenge that is a stretch for you, but is not a massive, absurd, crazy idea. So if I was going to set a 30-day challenge, my 30-day challenge wouldn't be to walk down to the shops in the next 30 days. Too easy. But my 30-day challenge also wouldn't be to climb Mount Everest in the next 30 days. It's too difficult. There's no way that I can get the amount of training preparation required to do that. An analogy that I like is something that I've found from practicing yoga. So here's me practicing yoga. And one of the things that people like to do in yoga, and sometimes that what you think about people doing in yoga, is being able to touch your toes. So actually I can touch my toes, but I can't demonstrate because you can't see it on the camera just now. So here's David, reaching down, touching my toes. Now for some people, when they first come into yoga, they can't touch their toes. They bend down a certain way, and that's as far as they're going. Now if that's the case for you, if you try to come into the yoga studio and you try to force yourself into touching your toes, you're going to do yourself an injury. It's stretching your body beyond its capabilities. For me, what this would be is trying to put my leg behind my head. I can't put my leg behind my head. I can touch my toes, I'm not putting a leg behind my head. So with a challenge, you want something that stretches you. So in yoga, if you can't touch your toes, then you reach down as far as you can, and maybe you can get to your knees. And as you just stretch into the posture, and you practice more and more, eventually you're going to be able to run your hands down your knees. They're going to go down your shins. And centimetre by centimetre, as you get more and more flexible, you're going to be able to get down the shins, and you're going to be able to touch your toes. So that is an example of a good challenge, where you've got this target of touching your toes, and maybe you can't do it right now, but you can get a little further down the process where you're stretching the muscles, but the muscles don't snap. You want a stretch goal, a stretch challenge, not a snap challenge. So for me, if I go into the yoga studio and I try to put my leg behind my head, I'm going to snap something. That's too big of a challenge. I need to work up to it. But there are certain postures that I find more difficult than others, that I can't do the most advanced stages of that particular posture. That's something I can work towards. I can stretch towards that. With yoga, quite literally, I'm stretching towards that. So this is what the 30-day challenge is all about. It's setting yourself a challenge that's going to stretch you, just like stretching into that yoga pose, but it's not going to snap you. You're not going to snap like a rubber band or snap like some tendon or ligament in your body. So this is something that I recommend doing across the different domains of your life. It's something you can do in fitness, it's something that you can do in your career or business, it's something you can even do in your relationships. You can set a 30-day challenge of, I want to smile at 3 people every single day, or I want to give my partner more compliments and more appreciation. That's something you can put into a 30-day challenge as well. So that's what I recommend for being able to increase your challenge. Okay, so what about effort? So effort isn't quite as a tactical one as challenges. But for me, the way that I like to look at increasing effort is by having these little mantras and sayings to myself. I'll put mantras. So what I'm really aware of now is any time where I start feeling that I'm under effort or I'm starting to exert myself, I have this little ping that comes up and says, whatever you're doing, David, is requiring effort, which means that you're stretching yourself right now. And I think the best analogy is the one that we've used a couple times already, of being on that treadmill. And this is something that I relate to a lot through my own exercise practice, and it's one of the things that I've really learned through exercising. You see, you learn a lot more in the gym than just how to get fitter and how to build more muscle and how to lose weight. There's loads of personal development practices and loads of psychology that you learn in the process of exercise, and one of these is to have this real comfort and acceptance of effort. So if I'm lifting weights, and let's say last week I was able to lift a weight 10 times. The following week, when I get to 10 times, I've lifted that weight 10 times. I know that if I lift the weight that 11th time, then I've done better than I did last week. But also, when you get to 10, there's that temptation to stop. It started to get sore, it started to get difficult, and when you get to 10, you're saying, you know what, I got to 10 again, that's good enough. But if you put in the effort and you get to 11, you've just improved. And if you do that on a consistent basis, you start to build muscle. So that week, you managed to push it to 11. The following week, you managed to push it to 12. And that is how muscle builds, is through applying stress and strain to the muscle. And it's an effort to do that. It's hard, it's difficult. So anytime that I feel that something is starting to test me and I'm starting to get to that point of, oh, this is tough. Do I still want to go on? It's getting kind of difficult now. I say to myself, not literally, but more on a metaphorical basis now, I'm in the gym. I need to push out this next rep. I need to do one more. This is going to help me grow. This is going to help me develop. Now that might be lifting weights. For those of you who do running, we're talking about running on the treadmill again. Very similar sort of thing, where actually you start to get to this point where even though it's taxing and it's difficult, there's actually the kind of perverse sense of enjoyment in it. I want you to have a perverse sense of enjoyment about the things that you require effort for in life. So that might be your fitness routine, that might be things that you're working on in your career, that might even be your relationships. You might find it difficult to approach someone and ask for their number. You might find it difficult to pitch someone a business idea. But when you're finding that moment of effort, say to yourself, I'm growing. I'm building muscle. Either literal muscle in your exercise or a metaphorical muscle of being able to do something again and again with greater strength. So that's effort. Now looking at failure, I'm just going to check how much room I've got on the whiteboard there. So with failure, there's a 3-step process that I like to look at when we're looking at failure. Specifically when a failure happens. So how do we get the most out of a failure? Because failures, they can hurt, they can sting. And I'm not saying that developing a growth mindset is about having this kind of Terminator attitude to failure where failure is just data. Failure is emotional and failure can sting. But what's important is to not let that pain and discomfort stop you from doing it again. Stop you from progressing. Stop you from learning. So a failure, I think there's a 3-step process that you have to go through. Number 1. Take the hit. This is what we just talked about here. Take the hit. Failure does hurt. It does sting. And in the initial rawness of that failure, just accept it and process it. And really focus on taking away that raw, sharp edge to the failure. So start looking at your self-care. Maybe something that you do to feel good. So that might be that you go and exercise, you go and run about, or you go and play some sports with someone. That might be that you go and spend time with people who bring you up, with friends or with family. Maybe that's things like you meditate or you have a nice bubble bath, whatever it is that boosts your mood and just takes away the rawness of that failure. That's really key to the first part of this. Because when you start trying to react to failure in an emotional place, emotions are really important. They're so much of what drives our behavior, but emotions are really rubbish for problem solving. And if you want to problem solve how not to fail next time, doing it when you're emotional is not the best state to do it in. So what you do first is you take the hit and you process the emotion. So second of all, watching my space here. So secondly, when you've taken the hit, when you've processed that emotion, when you've taken off the raw sting of it, sometimes this is just a case of sleeping on it. Sometimes this is just a case of taking a fresh day and approaching the failure. Sometimes, depending on the scale of the failure, this takes a little bit longer. Maybe it takes a few days, a week, maybe it even takes months to do this. I'm not saying that it is something that you can do quickly and effortlessly. It may well take time. But when you've taken the emotion out of the situation, I just said earlier, emotions are rubbish for problem solving. So don't stay in the emotional state and try to solve problems. Move through the emotional state, accept it, process it. And when you've done so, you can then go into problem solving mode. I think you're getting just a little bit dark on that whiteboard, so I'm going to switch on the light as we finish this off. Hopefully that makes things a little bit better for you. So once you've gone out of emotion and into your intellect and into your cognitive ability, that's much better for problem solving. And look at the situation, look at what's going on, and say to yourself, what can I do next? What can I do to make the situation better? What can I do to fix, repair, or improve things? And start to identify some next steps for yourself. And this is really key. This is where you start taking responsibility. Responsibility, not in terms of blame, but in terms of looking at the root of the word, responding with ability. the ability to respond. This is a concept that I've been getting really big and focused on this year, is this idea of responsibility is, what can I do? What can I do to improve the situation? How can I take responsibility? Don't focus on the things that you can't control. If you keep on focusing on the things that you can't control, I can't change the weather outside. I can't change if my numbers are going to come up in the lottery. I can't change the result of the next political election. I can't decide whether the market goes up or down. If I focus on all these things that I can't control, then I will live a very helpless victim existence, where I feel that everything is happening to me and not directed by me. That is the key component of Author Your Life. Author Your Life is not about allowing your story to be written for you, it's about allowing your story to be written by you. And that's really the premise and the energy behind this second step. Go into problem solving. Okay, we've had a failure, we've had a mistake, we've had a mess up. What can I do next to make the situation better? Then we've got a third step. How much space do I have on this whiteboard? Oh, you know what? Shall I rub it out or shall I move it down? I'm going to move this down a little bit. How's that? Yeah, look at that. Awesome. Just enough space. This is the last thing that we're going to cover today. So thank you for staying online. Thank you for staying patient. If you've got any questions about this stuff we've been talking about, pop them in right now, because I'm going to move to the Q&A after I finish this point. So number 3 is identify the learning. As I said earlier, people with the growth mindset, they recognize that in life, you either win or you learn. When you've had a failure, identify what did you learn. Okay, so I did it wrong that time. How would I do it differently next time? That path didn't work. What are the alternative paths that I can take? Step number 3 is identify the learning. I'm just going to move you up again so I can see your lovely faces and you can see mine as well. So that's how we develop this growth-minded attitude towards failure. Take the hit, process the emotions, get out of an emotional state. You're going to be rubbish at solving the problem whilst you're in your emotions. Process them, accept them, and when you've moved out the emotional state, back into your intellect, back into your cognitive state, then focus on problem solving. What's the next step? What can I take responsibility for? And then thirdly, as you started to move forward, perhaps even as you start moving past that failure, actually you make a mistake, but you quickly adjust and you get back on course and things are going better than ever. Don't get complacent just because you managed to dodge that bullet. Complacency will bring you down later on. Look back at that failure and say, okay, what went wrong there? What misstep did I take? What could I do better if I was in that situation next time? That's how you approach failure in a growth-minded way. And that really is the essence of how we start to develop the Mozart mind. The Mozart mind is all about recognizing the ability we have to change, grow, and adapt the way that our brain works. And when you start plugging in these elements, when you start working on consistently challenging yourself, when you work on consistently putting in the effort, when you work on being able to embrace failure, accept failure, and ultimately learn from failure, that's when you start to develop this ability. Mozart kept on playing more and more difficult and complicated pieces in order to build his skill. Mozart put in the effort. He spent hours every single day learning those pieces, practicing them. And sometimes, during all those practices, he was messing up. He was putting his fingers in the wrong place and he couldn't get his hand across quick enough to play that part of the tune. Mozart didn't let that stop him. That's what allowed him to become the great influential musician that he was. And for you in your life, whatever legacy you want to leave and whatever influence you want to make, you can go through the same process. How do you challenge yourself? Put in the consistent effort and do not be afraid of failure. That is the Mozart Mind. We've had a few people logging on, coming in live and dotting about. I know this is around about tea time, so maybe you've gone off to make some dinner, you're coming back in from work. Hopefully you've managed to make some dinner and perhaps watch this whilst you're eating. If anyone's got any questions, just as I'm rubbing off this final piece of the board, I'll give you a few moments to answer your questions. I can't see anything coming up just now, but we'll see how that goes. So let me know your questions. And this counts as well if you're also watching the replay. If this isn't live for you right now and this is pre-recorded, then please do leave the questions as well, because I can answer those retrospectively. It's my fancy word for the day, retrospectively. So I've got a minute or so for questions to come in. Tomorrow, we're going to be exploring the process of being the hero a little bit further. So we've really been examining today how the mind works, the basic mechanisms of the mind, kind of starting off really at the foundations. When you understand these foundations, they're going to help you to build up. You've got to start at that point, and we've started at that point. We've understood the basic building blocks of what is going to allow you to author your life. Tomorrow, we're going to be looking at... Goodness me. I can tell when I've been speaking for a while, because what starts to slip is my is my control of language. I start misspelling things and I start mispronouncing things. When I get to the end of one of my day seminars, for example, I start losing the ability to something like the connecting words. It just happened to me then. I lose the ability for just some of the small connections that you need in a sentence for the sentence to come across fluidly. That's what starts to get lost for me. It's not the memory, it's not even necessarily the energy and passion behind the message, it's just kind of like the articulation of making it happen. But this is what we're going to be talking about tomorrow, the magic pill. Really building upon what we've talked about today in terms of, well, how do you really start to put this stuff into action? What are the practices and habits you can do on a consistent basis that's really going to allow you to unleash the potential that you have in your mind? Because as we saw earlier, you've got so much potential in your mind. When you're born, you really can be anything. You can be Mozart. You can be Elon Musk. You can be Nelson Mandela. They were all born with the same brain mechanisms as we have been born with. And if you utilize and understand these mechanisms, and if you start to put in some of what we're going to talk about tomorrow, you can really take your levels of joy, of energy, enthusiasm, and engagement in life to just a whole other level. And that's what we're going to discuss in tomorrow's show. So I hope you'll join me again then. It's going to be same as always, live at 5. I hope you've enjoyed today. Whether you're watching live or you're watching this as a replay, thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening to the content. I hope you found it useful. As I said, a final call. If there are any questions, anything you want me to elaborate on, anything you want me to clarify, let me know in the comments below and I'll be happy to answer. Otherwise, guys, I hope you've enjoyed the very first show of the Author Your Life Festival, and I look forward to delivering more for you in the next 6 days. 6 days, the festival has barely even begun. This is like the Friday night at Glastonbury. You have the Friday night at Glastonbury and you're like, whoa, that was amazing, that was epic. And there's 2 more days. Oh. Well, this festival, we've got 6 more days. So speaking of dinner, I'm going to go and make myself some dinner because it's hungry work doing all this speaking. Thank you all for joining. Enjoy the rest of your evening and enjoy the rest of your week as well. I look forward to sharing it with you as we go through. So guys, until next time, remember that you are the author of your life. You hold the pen and you can write whatever script you want for yourself. So go out today, the rest of the week, and the rest of your life, and write yourself a beautiful story. I'll speak to you soon. Ciao for now. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd appreciate it hugely if you could head over to iTunes and leave a rating and review for the podcast. With your review, please be as honest and detailed as you can be. Because with honest and detailed feedback, that helps me to adapt and grow this podcast to most serve you, the listener. Also, if you enjoyed this episode, then make sure you subscribe to the podcast. That way you aren't going to miss any of the future episodes that we've got lined up for you. Until next time, remember that you are the author of your life. You hold the pen, and you can write whatever script you want for yourself. So go out today and write yourself a beautiful story.